So go ahead.
So, what town are you live in?
Live in Wellfleet. Oh, I tell you, my name is Roger Putnam, and I live in Wellfleet. And we've lived in Wellfleet for over 30 years. And just for the record, both my daughter Rebecca and my son Roger graduated from Norset High School.
Roger Jr.
He's Roger the third, actually.
Oh.
And my daughter is now living on the West Coast, and she is a crab fisherman.
Very nice.
And my son is just got his professorship at the community college in Irvine, California, where he teaches geology. So now go on. Now your question.
Okay, we are going to begin. What was it like growing up in the 1930s?
Like ladies growing up any other time, you gradually get your hands dirty and your feet dirty, and your father tells you what you can and what you can't do, and your mother reinforces every bit of it.
Could you tell us a little bit about what your family was like growing up?
Well, my father was a salesman, and he was home almost all the time, but my mother was the one who was sort of there all the time. And she was a very special person. She was a librarian in Indian Head, Maryland, where she met my father in World War I while he was at the Dahlgren Proving Ground. He was a math major from MIT at that point, and he was at Dahlgren doing a calculation on trajectory of shells and whatnot. And he met my mother, and after her consultation with various people, she decided he was about as good as she was going to get, so she better take him, and off she went.
All right. How did your upbringing affect your decision about being in the war?
Well, there's a very silly story that involved my going to Europe for a year. You don't want it.
Okay.
But because I was in Europe for a year, I became very friendly with a number of European kids more or less my age, which led me to form a very strong distaste for what was going on in Germany. And as the war progressed, my cousin Bill Bundy and I, he was at the Harvard Law School at that time, and I was a freshman, we formed a thing called the Society for Militant Aid to Britain, because we felt very strongly that the U.S. should be in the war, that they were fighting our battle as well as their battle. And the result of that was, as soon as it happened, I volunteered right away. I mean, I couldn't be saying we ought to join the militant aid, we ought to send militant aid to Britain, and then when we get in the war, why not get in too? So I got right in.
How did your family react when you told them that you were going to join the war?
Well, my father said good. He was planning to volunteer also, which he did. And my brother, who was just a year younger than I am, volunteered also. He was in the 10th Mountain Infantry, and he went all the way up from Sicily up through Italy in Europe. My father, who had been working for then Admiral Kirk at the Dahlgren Proving Ground when he met my mother, became his chief of staff for the landings in Normandy. So that my mother had 2 sons and a husband who were busy in the war.
What did you think of the war before you joined?
What did I think of what?
What were your views of the war before you joined?
Well, I felt very strongly that we needed to exert everything we could to prevent Hitler and fascism from overrunning Europe. And I was perfectly willing to go to war on account of it. So it was a matter of very personal belief, because I'd seen enough of it to hate it.
Thank you. Now we're going to start during the war. Why the Air Force, the Army?
Well, I'd learned to fly well before the war. I used to fly with the Granville brothers in Springfield, Massachusetts. I was taught by a man named Connie Langone back, and I got my pilot's license in 1936. So that I'd had it for a long time. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I got in the war, everybody who went into the Army Air Force was sent to Montgomery, Alabama, where they spent 90 days learning how to be officers and gentlemen before they were sent off to do their duty. Well, because I already had the flight time, and they didn't want to waste time trying to teach me to be a gentleman. They just taught me how to be an officer and then get the hell out. So that I was first assigned as a chauffeur for General Vincent J. Malloy, who was the commanding general of the Central Training Command. And I couldn't get out of that quick enough. Just couldn't. Which is how I ended up where I did. Because I just made such of a nuisance of myself that I got assigned to to the 404th, and 404th was a bunch of B-20s, A-20s, who were finally sent to Guadalcanal. Well after the serious part of Guadalcanal, we were just sent down there to keep the slot clear. And the slot is the strait between the islands of Borneo and Guadalcanal and New Guinea, and our job was to keep the Japanese vessels out of the strait. The Japanese, having had the north side of it for years, Guadalcanal was the turning point of World War II. That was where we stopped the Japanese, reversed it, and began pushing them back. Now, I was not there for that piece of it. That happened 2 months before I got there. But we were sent there for this particular job, flying up and down the strait and making sure no Japanese vessels were able to resupply their operations on New Guinea. And having done my tour there, I was sent back home again and was assigned to Edwards, where I was supposed to be an instructor for other kids flying 25s, which I liked to fly because it's a nice airplane. But then the chance came along to join the 20th with the A-26s, which is the finest prop-driven plane the military had, and was sent to Saipan, and then we finally ended up Saipan, Tinian, and then Iwo. We were flying lead missions for the 29s, essentially trying to burn Japan down. Mm-hmm. And we were there when the Enola Gay made its trip.
Okay, ready? Could you describe some of your experiences from boot camp?
Boot camp? Well, nothing but I avoided work as much as possible. And the only thing that you would appreciate was that we were supposed to sing when we were on parade. Well, you know, they had all sorts of good things like Johnny Comes Marching Home, and well, we got sick and tired of that. So on Christmas Eve, there was a grand review for the general commanding, and we sang Jingle Bells. And as a group, we were reprimanded for singing Jingle Bells at our parade.
Okay. What were your living conditions like?
Good. No problem. Just everything was. We had bunks and whatnot. On Guadalcanal, we were. The Marines had been there for 2 months, and so there was some pretty good stuff there. And we were living in canvas Nissen huts, so that we were pretty well protected from the weather. And there was nothing wrong with it. The food was good, so no problem. On Saipan, we were living in permanent structures where they'd put a bunch of Nissen, those crown round Nissen huts up there, and so those were good. When we were first moved up to Iwo, we were living in tents again, which was kind of primitive, but after a while they began to get stuff in there for us. But we were well fed all the time. We never had a problem with food or any of that sort of stuff. So there was nothing tough about the war as far as I was concerned.
Did you form any relationships?
Excuse me?
Did you form any relationships?
Yeah, a couple of them. Unfortunately, both of them have since died. Which is, you don't get to be 95 and people don't keep up with you all the time. Mm-hmm. But I had a couple of good friends. One fellow that he went into business in Holyoke, Massachusetts, while I was in business in East Longmeadow, Massachusetts. And we used to play squash every day at noon for an hour. We both got our exercise that way.
Describe some of your experiences fighting in the war.
Well, very boring. take off, fly up and down the slot, which is about 300 miles. So you'd make a one way up and one way back, land, tank up, go back out and do it again. And usually nothing happened. When we were on Saipan, nothing. I mean, just we could only hold about 500 pounds worth of bombs, so that the rest of it was all fuel. So we'd fly for 5 hours, dump our things, turn around and fly back for 5 hours, and it was utterly boring. Then when we got to Iwo, we had much bigger loads, and we had therefore the capacity to do much more damage. But these teeth aren't mine. And that's because they sent us 3 A-20s that had forward-firing 75-millimeter cannons, which fired a shell about that big around. If you turn that on in, and that's how big it was. And they were sent to us because the Japanese main protein supply was fish. And trying to get rid of trawlers with B-29s was pretty much a useless activity, because you'd really roil the waters, but you'd seldom get one of them. They were so small. So they sent these out with the theory that we could go out and just pop them off. Well, the instructions were, don't touch till we send the guys out who knows what to do with them. Well, you can tell a bunch of 22, 23-year-olds, that sort of thing, who'd all been flying for years. No. Jump in and off we go. And we got a trawler. Oh, boy. Well, we'd seen the pictures of the Navy with their torpedo planes getting down on the deck and flying along. So let's get down on the deck and we'll fly right along and we'll take care of that Japanese bastard. And nobody told us that we were going to lose about 50 knots when you pull the trigger because of the recoil of the gun. So I'm sitting there with my face up against the prismatic gun sight, and I push the button, and these 3 teeth, I bit the gun sight and lost them. Meantime, my shell goes right through the Japanese trawler, which was no thicker than a beer can, and goes off about 50 yards beyond the trawler. So a nice hole in the thing, and big poof. And all I do was ventilate the son of a gun, and didn't do any damage at all. What we learned out of that was what you'd have to do is come down at an angle so the shell exploded near the hull of the thing, and then they did it. But in the meantime, I got 3 new teeth.
Okay. What was your darkest moment from the war?
Darkest?
Mm-hmm. I have crazy dogs.
A very close friend went missing in the slot, and we still don't know what happened to him. There's no record of what happened. It wasn't fuel. It could have been enemy action. We don't know, but he never made it back. And he was somebody who'd been with me right almost from the beginning. So we were very close friends, and but that happened to everybody. It wasn't unique to me at all.
Now, what was your happiest moment?
When they handed me my discharge and said, "Go home, kid." Well, no. When the war was all over and we were sent back to Shepherd Field, just waiting to get in line at Camp Fannin to get discharged, they put us in the BOQ, the Bachelor Officer Quarters, and the building they put us in had a cat in it. And it was a 6-man operation, and this cat was just the reverse of housebroken. So that I knew what to do with a cat that's not housebroken: rub its nose in it and throw it out the window. You know that as well as I. Everybody knows how to housebreak a cat. Well, this cat was a little bit of a jump ahead of us. The cat would come inside, do it, rub its own nose in it, and jump out the window. A well-trained cat knew exactly what to do. Anything else you want to know?
That's okay. How your expectations of the war, how did your expectations of the war compare to the actual reality?
It couldn't have been better. I mean, I didn't go through the kind of slogging that went on in Europe. I didn't go through that sort of perpetual 10 yards and dig a trench kind of a thing because I was in the Air Force. And therefore, I didn't have that kind of a reaction to what went on. With me, the goal was pretty easy: destroy fascism, and then because the Japanese had joined fascism, let's get rid of the Japanese first. Only we got rid of the Germans first. My father and my brother were on that team. I wasn't, unfortunately.
What did you miss while you were at war? Any people, places, something you miss seeing every day?
I don't remember. I don't remember. I just sort of miss being home, and I miss sort of family, but that was all. There was no great, I had no heartthrob that I missed at all.
From your time in the military, what was your proudest achievement?
Coming out alive.
Pretty good. Here, we're going to start with after war now. What was it like coming back into civilian life?
Well, I had no objectives when I came back, so that the guy who was ahead of me in line to the separation center, his family managed a ranch for the Gill Cattle Company in southwestern Arizona. So that when we were just talking about what you're going to do, he said, well, why don't you come out and work for us? So I said, sure, I'll come out and work for you. I don't give a damn. So I spent 3 or 4 years punching cattle and generally enjoying myself in the Southwest.
What is something you miss about your time in the service, if anything?
I miss being able to fly a lovely airplane for nothing.
Explain the most important thing you learned during your time.
In the service?
Yes.
I learned the real importance of teamwork, what it means to work with people, not just in the same room, but with common goals and common objectives and capacity to help each other to reach a common goal. That was the big thing I got out of it.
What would you have done if you didn't join the war?
Well, I was in my sophomore class at Harvard. At that point, I'd probably gotten finished off my education and then wouldn't have known what to do with myself because I'd been spoiled rotten as a kid.
What was Harvard like? Hard-wise?
Entirely different school from what it is now. At that point, it was focused really on education and broadening your view of the world. And it's changed a great deal since I was there. So that, but at that point, it was top shelf and difficult to get into and difficult to stay in.
Do you have any regrets, if any?
For the war? No, if it hadn't been for the war, I probably wouldn't have grown up. Well, you know what I mean. It hastened the process of maturation.
What was it like the day you came home?
Well, I didn't exactly come home. I didn't get home for, well, in the middle of the summer in Arizona, you can't punch cattle. It's too damn hot. So that I drove home, and the family was living in Petersham at that point, and it was just sort of wonderful to see all my siblings and hug my mother and all that sort of stuff. It was just really nice, but nothing really special. I mean, it was really special to me, but it wasn't an event.
If you could go back in time knowing then what you do now, would you change anything?
The answer is if there was a moment in time when I could freeze everything, it would stay that way forever. Yes, there were moments when that could have happened, but taken as a whole, no. I mean, your life is a sequence, and you better learn to live in the sequence. That's all.
If your grandson or granddaughter was planning on enlisting in the military, what would you tell them?
Go right ahead. Be good for you.
So we're only at our 20-minute mark.
Yeah.
Is there any other stories that you think are worth the talk, or anything that you want to share about the military? Any advice?
The military, no. I mean, essentially, once you are through with military training, then you don't have to go near them anymore. I mean, they're good because of they were good for me because I was a rotten kid, no question, and therefore I got straightened out and hammered into line, and generally learned how to work with people and so on. But that's about all. You know, after that, nothing.
What made you want to come to Cape Cod?
Well, I sold my business, and Jill, my wife, who is an educator, she's a graduate of Wheelock. We looked around where we wanted to go. We'd been down here in the summertime for a number of years. And so, as we looked around on the Cape, she felt the education system in the North region was the best available, so we just looked around till we found something we liked in Wellfleet and moved there.
Okay. Did you ever have really any traumatic experiences that really, you can remember?
No, I was basically lucky, and also I was blessed with a crew chief. That was my last two tours with a crew chief who felt it was his duty to keep me alive rather than just keep the airplane running. And so I had nothing no bad moments. When I lost my front teeth, that was kind of a bad moment, but that's a different story. That was my own fault.
Could you tell us a little bit about your tours?
My toys?
Your tours?
My tours? Well, I've told you what I did, which in one tour was Guadalcanal, which was after Guadalcanal was after we'd won the battle, and we are now trying to start moving north again. And then my tours with the 20th were all Pathfinder for the 29s, and it was simple duty, because what we did was to fly across the island, come in out of the sunset, so they couldn't see us particularly well. We have the fastest airplane that existed in the world at the time. You drop water in it, and we're doing 400 knots, so they couldn't track us with flak, and had no MiGs couldn't get us. So did our bombs and get up and got away, and it was that kind of duty. It wasn't. We weren't sitting there being shot at by all. I mean, if they were shooting at us, they were going off way behind us because they couldn't track us fast enough.
Were you ever fearful about carrying all those bombs?
No. Never even gave it a thought, as a matter of fact. The real question was, can I get off the ground with this load of fuel? We knew what the bombs were. The fuel was always the question. So if I can't get off the runway with this load of fuel and bombs, I'm going to create a mess at the end of the runway. I didn't want that.
What motivated you to endure through the hardships of war?
Well, I want to get it over with.
No family, though?
Well, again, you have to look at my family. My father was in Europe. My brother was in Europe. He was with the 10th Mountain Infantry. My mother was my mother was a very competent lady, and so there was nothing that sort of worried me at that point at home.
I think we are ready to wrap it up.
You are.
We are. We're at 25 minutes. That was great. Thank you. We're going to quickly look this over and talk. So sorry about
You've
my
never
dog.
asked me what I did after the war.
What did you do after the war?
Well, my stroke of luck was that in Arizona again, in the summertime, you couldn't punch cattle, so I went to work for an oil company over in the Papago Indian Reservation, and there you're drilling in caliche, which is metamorphosed sandstone, very, very hard on drill bits, so you have to lubricate them, and you lubricated them by taking clay paper and wrapping it around the bit as it's going down, and turning and turning and turning. Well, to feed paper into that meant that you pretty soon woke up and said, "Good morning, Charles. How are you today?" And I figured out a way to bring it over a shoulder so that you could feed it without sticking your fingers down in the hole. And then, as I looked at that, it very quickly led itself into the idea of how to make a bag. And so the machinery that you get your potato chips in are all based on my original design for a bag, which grew out of that sort of thing. And I spent a number of years making machinery.
Really?
Okay.
Now, if you run out in the kitchen, I bet you can find a bag that was made with a machine that was dependent on my patents.
Wow.
Right now.
I never knew that.
Okay. You talked about how you had a business and then you sold it. What was that business?
It was
like?
building machinery, building
machinery.
packaging machinery, really. I mean, I went from the simple thing of bag making to I got in love with chewing gum and how to wrap chewing gum. When I started in Beechnut and Wrigley's, we had girls doing gum at about 60 sticks a minute. The last machine that I sold to Wrigley's did 3,000 sticks a minute.
Okay. Would you say that there's anything about the war that still affects you today that you still think of every now and then?
Reflect on.
No, not really. I mean, it was just part of my life. It was just, I mean, do you reflect on the last time you drove a car, for instance, which is probably more dangerous than being in the military. All done?
All done.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.